Welcome to Golden Rule Wisdom, where we explore the quiet power of consistency and the profound impact of daily, small habits. Meet George, a young man of 32 with a stable life, yet haunted by lingering feelings of unfulfilled potential every day. He had a nice apartment and a decent job, but he had never actually built anything meaningful with his own two hands. In his dusty garage sat a collection of beautiful woodworking tools, a precious inheritance left behind by his late, deeply beloved father. George always dreamed of making furniture, but procrastination always won the battle against his fragile motivation when the weekend finally rolled around. He would stare at the heavy wooden planks, feeling completely overwhelmed by the massive amount of effort required to start the project. Weeks turned into months. Hiding in the thick layer of dust on his father's tools only grew thicker, reflecting his growing inner frustration. He believed that true creation required a massive burst of inspiration, a sudden wave of endless energy that would carry him through. Since that magical surge of energy never arrived, George remained trapped in a cycle of endless planning and absolutely zero real execution. One sunny afternoon, while drinking coffee on his porch, George noticed his older neighbor William working quietly in the adjacent open yard. William was a calm man of 60, moving with a slow but incredibly deliberate rhythm as he carefully measured a wooden board. George watched with mild curiosity as the old man picked up a handsaw and began to cut the wood with smooth precision. To George's immense surprise, William stopped working after merely 20 minutes, wiped his dusty hands, and simply walked back into his house. The next day, at the exact same hour, William appeared again, worked for another brief 20 minutes, and then packed up completely. This strange pattern continued for an entire week, leaving George deeply puzzled by the old man's seemingly lazy approach to building furniture. However, by the end of the second week, those short daily sessions had magically transformed raw wood into a beautiful, sturdy chair. George could not contain his burning curiosity any longer, so he walked across the lawn to ask William about his unusual method. He praised the beautiful craftsmanship of the chair and confessed his own frustrating inability to even start a simple woodworking project indoors. William smiled warmly, pouring 2 cups of fresh lemonade, and motioned for his young neighbor to sit on the newly finished chair. The old man listened patiently as George explained how he always waited for the perfect moment of inspiration that never actually arrived. William chuckled softly and said that waiting for perfect motivation is like waiting for the wind to carry you to your destination. He explained that discipline is not about having explosive energy, but simply about making the quiet choice to show up every day. Starting and stopping is a totally normal part of life, William noted, looking thoughtfully at the scattered wooden shavings on the grass. The only real problem, the old man emphasized with a gentle tone, is when you decide to never go back to it. George absorbed these wise words, realizing that his grand expectations were the exact heavy chains keeping him paralyzed in a stagnant reality. That evening, George walked into his dusty garage, turned on the bright overhead light, and stared at the tools with new perspective. He did not plan to build an entire magnificent bookshelf tonight. He only promised himself to clean the workbench for 10 minutes. And he grabbed a rag and slowly wiped away years of neglected dust, feeling a strange sense of accomplishment in this tiny action. When 10 minutes passed, he stopped, turned off the light, and walked back inside, feeling lighter than he had in several months. The next day after work, he returned to the garage, picked up a pencil, and sketched a basic design for 5 minutes. On the third day, he finally touched the wood, carefully measuring and marking the first few pieces before calling it a night. There was absolutely no roaring excitement in his chest, just a quiet, steady rhythm of showing up and doing a little bit. Some evenings, George felt incredibly exhausted from his demanding office job, and wanted nothing more than to just collapse on the sofa. But he remembered William's gentle advice and forced himself to walk into the garage, even if only for 3 short, agonizing minutes. On those tough nights, and he would simply sand a single corner of a wooden board, wipe the dust, and then walk away. He learned that the magic was not in the volume of work completed, but in the simple act of refusing to quit. The act of returning, again and again, began to forge a new kind of mental strength deep within his previously hesitant mind. Slowly, the scattered pieces of timber began to resemble the sturdy frame of a tall bookshelf, rising proudly in the dim garage. George discovered that discipline did not require him to be a fearless warrior, it only required him to be a persistent participant. He no longer waited for the perfect sunny weekend or a sudden burst of extreme motivation to make progress on his project. A quick 5 minutes before dinner, or 10 minutes before bed, became his reliable weapons against the heavy burden of lifelong procrastination. One rainy Saturday, he spent a full hour assembling the shelves, completely lost in the smooth, rhythmic motion of turning the screws. He realized that momentum is built not by forceful pushing, but by the gentle, continuous rolling of a very small, steady wheel. The fear of failure had completely vanished, replaced by a quiet curiosity about what he could achieve with just a little effort. William occasionally walked over to check on his progress, offering brief nods of approval and sharing more quiet wisdom about the craft. The old man taught him how to read the grain of the wood and how to sand the rough edges with patience. George listened intently, absorbing not just the woodworking techniques, but the profound philosophy of living a deliberate, steady, and highly focused life. There were still days when George skipped his garage visits entirely, letting the stress of modern life temporarily derail his new habit. In the past, missing a single day would have triggered immense guilt and caused him to abandon the entire project forever, immediately. But now, armed with William's wisdom, he simply forgave himself and calmly returned to the workbench the very next sunny afternoon. He realized that perfection is an impossible illusion, while consistent recovery from failure is the true hallmark of a resilient, disciplined mind. The final stage of the project involved applying a rich, dark stain to the assembled wooden shelf to protect the beautiful surface. George took his time, spreading the liquid evenly, watching the raw timber transform into a sophisticated piece of beautiful, functional home furniture. As he wiped away the excess stain, he reflected on the incredible journey of the past 2 months in this quiet garage. He had not relied on explosive passion or dramatic midnight work sessions to finish this challenging task. He merely kept showing up. When the stain finally dried, George carried the heavy bookshelf inside his apartment and placed it gently against the empty living wall. He stepped back to admire his work, expecting a massive wave of victorious euphoria to crash over his tired but proud body. Instead, what he felt was a deep, quiet sense of peace, a grounded certainty that he was finally capable of achieving things. The shelf was not just a piece of furniture, it was a physical monument to his newly discovered power of daily consistency. He began to place his favorite books onto the sturdy wooden shelves, feeling a profound connection to the tools his father left. The tools were no longer symbols of his guilt and procrastination, but instruments of his quiet, steady, and incredibly rewarding personal growth. The next morning, George looked out his window and saw William tending to his garden with the same slow, deliberate, peaceful movements. He smiled, finally understanding the true secret of the old man's happy, productive life, hidden in plain sight all these long years. We often paralyze ourselves by imagining that success requires an impossible mountain of effort to be conquered in a single, exhausting day. We wait for the perfect mood, the ideal weather, or a magical surge of inspiration to finally start chasing our biggest dreams. But the truth is much simpler and far more forgiving than our anxious, overthinking minds ever allow us to actually truly believe. The secret lies in the humble willingness to open the door, step inside, and do just a tiny fraction of the work. It does not matter if you stop early or if you feel completely uninspired while performing the small task at hand today. The only thing that truly matters is your commitment to returning to the arena over and over despite the heavy mental resistance. Small, imperfect actions, repeated consistently over a long period, will always defeat the grand, flawless plans that remain forever trapped on paper. Your life is built by the quiet moments of showing up when nobody is watching and when you least feel like working. So, whenever you feel completely overwhelmed by a massive goal, remember to simply focus on the very next, tiny, manageable forward step. Forgive yourself for stopping, forgive yourself for resting, but make a firm promise to your future self that you will always return. Thank you for joining us today on this beautiful journey of discovering the immense power of small, consistent habits in daily life. Keep building your dreams one tiny piece at a time and stay tuned for more profound lessons here on Golden Rule Wisdom.